So, partway through the heartfelt and somber eulogy Black Panther Wakanda Forever was trying to give to the tragic loss of Black Panther, the movie just abruptly and awkwardly stops to introduce us to Riri Williams, a new character so awesome and important that she already had a spin-off show announced before this movie had even come out, showing how much confidence they had that she was going to be the next big thing in the MCMR-effing-U. Yeah, sure, besides the MacGuffin of the vibranium detection machine she'd built for the government and helping out with tech that Shuri was already more than capable of designing herself, you could have really cut her out of the movie. And sure, there was no real reason to have introduced this character in a Black Panther movie, since the only real connection she has to Black Panther or Wakanda is pretty much just related to the amounts of melanin in her skin. But you have to admit, the character's debut set the world on fire. Everyone was excited about her. Some of the new MCU characters hadn't been hitting it big recently, but with Riri Williams... Huh? What's that? Oh, she did not set the world on fire. Most people weren't all that invested in Shuri as the new Black Panther? So a minor side character to that story wasn't really that well remembered or cared about, and there are a number of people watching this video right now that didn't even know there was an Ironheart show coming out. Oh man. Oh no, it'd be embarrassing to have greenlit an estimated well over $100 million show for a character like that. But embarrassment seems to be what the MCU was going for at the time, because, like I said, 2 years before Black Panther 2 had even come out, Kevin Feige announced we'd be getting a show for this character without any idea if she'd be well received or not. And though they finished that show a while ago, they decided to wait to release it for quite a while. Already a pretty big red flag. And that's not even close to the only one. With the trailers and other promotional material we've gotten out of this show, there are quite a few. And though a lot of people are already confident this show is just gonna straight up suck, I've narrowed it down to 4 of the major red flags that those people are gonna turn out to be right. Starting with the first and most obvious one, even in the comics, Ironheart is not that popular. Now, every character is someone's favorite. No matter how annoying or lame you think a character is, there's at least one person out there who freaking loves them. And Ironheart is no exception. And there was a time she was popping up all over the place in comics. This happens anytime a character gets even a small amount of popularity. Comics have no restraint whatsoever when it comes to trying to milk a character for all they're worth. If they believe a character could be popular and make money, they will oversaturate the market, with comics featuring them as both guest stars in other titles and leads in their own. This is why Kamala Khan got pushed so insanely heavily, both in and out of comics. She discovered a niche audience of fans who genuinely did really like her lighthearted stories, power, and art style. And the absolute idiots in charge thought they'd struck gold with the next big character. And so, before we knew it, she was guest starring in every other comic and being shoved into the lead role in Avengers video games. Comics have always been this way, all the way back to Superman's insane levels of popularity at the beginning of the superhero comic medium. The characters who can survive this level of complete and utter oversaturation survive and become some of the most popular characters of all time, like Spider-Man, Wolverine, Batman, Venom, and many, many others. Then you have other characters like Ms. Marvel and Gwenpool, who did get pretty popular, but really couldn't maintain it as long as the publishers seemed to hope with the high levels of oversaturation that they were enduring. And then below that, you have characters like Ironheart, who they did try to push really, really hard, but did not even get to Ms. Marvel levels. Even in the comics, she really wasn't that unique or interesting. Super genius whiz kid who becomes a superhero? Yeah, there's a lot of those to compete with already. And a lot of longtime fans already found her incredibly annoying, simply for the fact that she was replacing Tony as the lead of the literal Iron Man series for a good while. She was then moved on to the Team Comic Champions, where I think she did find a little more success, partially because they gave her a much, much better armor, and let her develop beyond just being not Iron Man. But since then, nothing she's in is really topping the charts. She's a C-list character at best, and within a few years, I think she might drop down to D-list, if she isn't already. I mean, we'll see, but basically, she didn't stand the test of time. And the time she's been around isn't even that long. In comics, this kind of oversaturation just doesn't really matter. A new character you flood the market with doesn't succeed? Who gives a crap? All it costs you is the cost of some paper and the peasants' wages you pay the writers and artists between whipping them. But the budget for this show is estimated to be over $100 million. You can't take a risk on a character this new and already not particularly well received with that kind of money. That's absolutely insane. You may have noticed the MCU seems to be really confused lately. The success of it was based on taking popular characters and making big budget movies about them. Iron Man may not have been that well known by general audiences outside of comics, but within comics, he's been incredibly popular since the damn 60s. It was a safe bet to assume that if you could translate what people liked about him from the page to the screen, that he would do pretty well. Same with Captain America, Hulk, and Thor. And then in the next phases, the same goes for Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, and Black Panther. And with the shows She-Hulk, Moon Knight, both popular characters as well, with decades of stories that still see print today, even if they didn't do the best job. Even Kate Bishop has been around since 2005 and is still showing up here and there in comics, but they weren't stupid enough to give her a show without also having it star Clint Barton to convince people to watch it. There was a time they wouldn't even give Black Widow a solo movie because they were worried she wasn't big enough of a character. Now they're handing out movies to the Master of Kung Fu and a group of characters who will pop up from time to time in comics for a mini-series or guest appearance and then just disappear for a while. And Ironheart isn't even nearly as popular as those characters are. She'd only even been around in comics for like 4 years before they announced she was going to have her own show. That's insane. Did they somehow expect she was going to become more popular in the MCU than she already was in comics? What iconic plot lines did they possibly even have to work with for her? The only real thing she had of note was working with a hologram version of Tony Stark, and it doesn't seem like they're going to shell out the money needed to get that cameo. Which brings me to the next red flag. A Tony Stark story without Tony Stark. In the comics, Riri Williams was supposed to be kind of an Iron Man sidekick slash hero continuing his legacy kind of character. They didn't do a good job at that, but that was the basic idea. She reverse engineered the technology of Iron Man's armor. Tony learns of some of her exploits in that armor and decides to be a bit of a mentor to her, becoming a superhero. And after the god-awful Civil War II event, Tony is left comatose and has his consciousness transferred into an AI that continues to help train Riri. That's the idea of the character, and this show is going to try to do that story without Tony Stark. That'd be like if they never introduced Bucky and greenlit a show about him now, after Captain America's retired, with no Steve Rogers appearing in the show, and first introduced this new version of Bucky in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It wouldn't work. If you cut off Ironheart's connection to Tony and him reaching out to help train a brilliant young inventor like himself, what story are you left with? Just some random super genius girl who creates her own Iron Man armor and starts flying around. Bro, that sounds like some shit a kid would come up with in 2 seconds. And there's a reason many audiences did not like it when she first appeared in Black Panther, and why they're even less interested in a show featuring her now. Tony had just died a few years ago when she appeared. Fans were still feeling the hole he had left in the MCU, and now was the time for the people in charge of those movies to show that though his place could never be refilled, that they could offer some new and interesting characters and stories to move the MCU in a new and interesting direction. And what's the story they came up with to do that? Well, let's just make a new young girl Iron Man to replace him without her ever even having any connection to him in the first place. This was always going to get fan backlash, especially this quickly after Endgame, and especially when done this ham-fistedly. If they'd done a serious, somber story about a young girl who'd been inspired by Tony Stark in the same way Kate Bishop had been inspired by Hawkeye during the Battle of New York, maybe they could pull it off. But they didn't. We don't know anything about this chick. She just flies up as the cool new Iron Man, yo! And they do it in a movie where another young girl character is trying to replace the hole left by the death of another popular character. Trying to successfully replace T'Challa with Shuri as Black Panther was already an uphill battle. You try to do that with Iron Man 2 at the same time, you're just asking for the idea to fail. Why not have Miles Morales just appear in this movie to replace Peter Parker as well? Piss everyone off. Deadpool and Wolverine understood how much time and work you have to take to successfully sell a replacement character to audiences when they deeply love the original. And that was with the same goddamn actor. But with Iron Man, just toss her in a shitty side role and we'll do a TV show about it or something, and boom. And lastly, one of the big pitches they seem excited about for this show is the magic versus science plot that they have setting up between Ironheart and the Hood. Now, I'll be honest, I love a good magic versus science plot. I was already really excited to see one in the MCU one time, in Iron Man friggin' 3, with Iron Man versus the seemingly, though I will know not actually, magical appearing abilities of the Mandarin and his 10 rings. Well, as you all know, we didn't get that, and instead we got... And now they're repurposing that Tony story into this Ironheart show, leading me into my next red flag. Another major comic character wasted for nothing. No, that major comic character is obviously not Riri Williams. It's the show's main villain, the Hood. Now, you already will know, if you watch this channel, how many liberties the MCU takes with the source material. But even when they drastically change characters, the ones who get popular usually have just enough connection to the source material that they're mostly recognizable. When I saw this show was announced, I was completely apathetic. But when I heard the supervillain known as the Hood was going to be in it, my ears did perk up. In the comics, the Hood is Parker Robbins, a petty crook who gets involved in a job to rob a warehouse, where he inadvertently stumbles across a demonic ritual taking place. He shoots the demon that had been summoned when it attacks him and steals its cloaks and boots so he won't leave the botched job empty-handed. Soon discovering the boots allow him to levitate and the cloak allows him to become invisible, but over time he also gains other abilities to channel demonic powers as well. He uses the cloak to continue as a criminal before eventually trying to set himself up as the godfather of the supervillain community by assembling and commanding a small army of other costumed criminals, putting together a team strong enough to even take on the Avengers. Well, hell yeah, man, awesome! Sounds like a kick-ass and pretty straightforward character to adapt into the MCU. We've got enough very small, unremembered MCU villains that he could even assemble a few of them into the beginnings of his criminal empire, give a little redemption to awful adaptations like the Wrecking Crew, have Ironheart have to prove herself by facing off against them. Sounds fun! So let's take a look what we're getting. Looks like he has a very small gang of just regular people, and he's going to recruit Riri Williams into it because they're two sides of the same coin, and the show will be exploring that relationship. He's a misfit who recruits other misfits to prove to the people up top that they belong or something, huh? Oh, and he doesn't seem to wear the hood all that often, and let's see, what's this? His mother raised him in Chicago, where she was a member of the real-life Puerto Rican street gang turned far-left activist organization, the Young Lords, and she raised him with those kinds of ideals, and he's gonna look like this. Well, what virtually non-existent levels of excitement I had for the character is, pretty much just gone by this point. Because Ironheart is such a minor character in comics, they had to grab a completely unrelated villain for her to fight. You know what? New rule. If a hero has no real villains, don't make a show or movie about him, okay? It just means that they haven't had enough time in comics to even build up any kinds of rogues gallery, or they're not being told in the kinds of stories that are easy to translate into a show like this. There's plenty of ways Hood could have been used that would have been interesting, especially as a character to introduce more street-level supercriminals, something the MCU is severely lacking in, and in a way where he could stick around as a cool background menace. Being in this show, you can already tell he's going to be completely forgotten, as previous villains like Flag Smasher and the Wrecking Crew already have been from the shows they were in before this, leading us to our last red flag. The declining quality of previous Disney Plus shows. When they started creating shows around MCU characters, the audience interest was pretty damn strong. WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, sure, they were divisive to fans and at some parts pretty boring and stupid, but many of us forgave that awkwardness at first. The MCU was trying to find its footing in television and a lot of us were willing to give them a little bit to do that. But then She-Hulk came out, and everything I and many others didn't like about some of those previous shows, the obvious low budgets, abject disregard for the source material, the watering down of beloved characters and story arcs, all that and more issues were incredibly prevalent in that show. And I was sure it couldn't get worse than that, but God, it did. Secret Invasion was one of the boringest, stupidest wastes of time ever made. It was not even pretending to have read the comics it was based on. It turned Nick Fury from a badass super spy to a dirty homeless man wandering around aimlessly. It friggin' killed Maria Hill for nothing more than a shocking ending by having her stupidly not realize the shapeshifter they were chasing may have shapeshifted. It tried to imply, though I'll never believe it, that Rhodey was a Skrull since Endgame, and it introduced the most powerful character in the entire MCU who I'm pretty sure will never appear or be referenced again. And then they crapped out all of Echo at once, because they knew they had a terrible product no one cared about that they just wanted to get out of the way. A show about the least interesting character in Hawkeye, with some of the worst fight scenes I've ever seen. And where they changed the lead character's powers from the ability to echo the movements of others and mimic them perfectly by watching them, to some kind of racist BS echoing the wisdom of her ancestors mumbo-jumbo, with virtually everything they did with the Kingpin in that series just being ignored the next time we see him. And now, Ironheart. She-Hulk, Secret Invasion, and Echo are some of the worst shows I've ever seen. Not even just the worst MCU shows. Why should I expect that this show should be of any higher quality? Some of those trailers looked okay too. I fully expected She-Hulk to be just fine, if not good, until I had to watch her claim her upper-class privileged life was harder than Bruce frickin' Banner of all people, hear her objectify his basically dead friend's ass to his face, have a whole plotline claiming that people who don't like the show are misogynistic trolls in the show itself, and an ending where she jumps out of the Disney Plus screen and then goes to management to complain about having to have a coherent plot that makes sense. I don't know who any of these shows were trying to target. It's not MCU fans, it's not comic fans, and it's definitely not fans of good TV. When Agatha All Along is the best of the bunch because at least it seemed like they knew the plot of the series when they started the first episode, you know you're in trouble here. These shows have been somehow lowering the bar further and further with every release. Why the hell should I expect that to suddenly change? With Ironheart, of all series. And I know, this all sounds very negative. But here's the part in these kinds of videos where I balance things out by saying what I think looks good about a show and offering a bit of hope. But I don't have any of that with this show. I don't think it'll be as stupid as She-Hulk, as low effort as Secret Invasion, or as unprofessional as Echo, but that's not saying much. I expect it to be completely by the numbers, mediocre, and forgettable. But what I can say positively is that if we're getting a show about as small of a character as Ironheart, a Disney Plus NFL Super Pro show cannot be far behind. But we'll see soon. If you disagree and think this show's going to be kick-ass and Ironheart's going to become a beloved member of the MCU, let me know below. If you see any more red flags for the show, let me know too. And if you want breakdowns of upcoming nerdy crap from somebody who actually cares if things are going to be good or bad and all that jazz, click that subscribe button as well as the bell, and I'll see you soon. And how can you be iconic by stealing Iron Man's armor? What the hell are they even going for with